The Adventist Musician Network is an authorized licensee of the name Adventist and is recognized by the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists as an independent Christian organization within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Adventist Musician Network is not affiliated with or financially supported by the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists. All views expressed, content, and opinions with all services offered reflect those of the Adventist Musician Network and not the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Sing the love of Jesus on A.M.N. Live. Hear the love of God every Saturday night. Sinners, musicians, SDA Christians, worship the Lord, your Savior and mine. Come on, come on, let's A.M.N. Live.
Everybody, let's go.
A.M.N. Live. You're watching A.M.N. Live. A.M.N. Live. You're watching A.M.N.
Didn't know you'd come to save us, Lord, to take our sins away. Our eyes was blind, we couldn't see. We didn't know who
J'ai envie de témoigner, j'ai envie de parler et de partager que je ne suis jamais seule, car tu marches tous les jours à mes côtés. Malgré mes imperfections, tu adores vraiment ton regard bienveillant. Oh oui, tu prends soin de moi, tu guides chacun de mes pas. Je veux chanter que tu es bon pour moi. Oh, car tu as brisé mes chaînes, tu m'as délivré de toutes mes peines. Et j'ai la joie dans le cœur, je veux crier mon bonheur. Toute ma vie, je voudrais te chanter, t'adorer, t'honorer, t'élever et dire au monde que tu es si bon pour moi. Je lève ma voix pour te glorifier. Quand les gens autour de moi ne comprennent pas d'où me vient ma joie, je leur parle encore de toi, je partage tout ce que tu fais pour moi. Ma vie est entre tes mains, je ne veux plus me soucier du lendemain. J'avance toujours par la foi, tu as tout prévu pour moi. Je m'imagine vivre un jour avec toi. Oh, oh. Là-haut, plus de peine, non, non, là-haut, la douleur ne sera plus, non. Là-haut, tu seras si beau, oui, je veux vivre avec toi. Toute ma vie, je voudrais te chanter, t'adorer, t'honorer, t'élever et dire au monde que tu es si bon pour moi. Je lève ma voix pour te glorifier. Toute ma vie, je voudrais te chanter, t'adorer, t'honorer, t'élever et dire au monde que tu es si bon pour moi. Je lève ma voix pour te glorifier.
Que tout le monde tape les mains. Que tout le monde tape les mains. Que tout le monde tape les mains. Et on va dire oh, 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 c'est oh, 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 oh.
Toute ma vie, je voudrais te chanter, t'adorer, t'honorer, t'élever et dire au monde que tu es si bon pour moi. Je lève ma voix pour te glorifier. Toute ma vie, je voudrais te chanter, t'adorer, t'honorer, t'élever et dire au monde que tu es si bon pour moi. Je lève ma voix pour te glorifier.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening to our viewing audience. Good evening to you, to all our guest panelists tonight. I am excited about tonight's program, To Him or Not to Him. I just really want to thank each of you for being a part. And let's do this. Can everyone just give a 15 to 20-second introduction of yourself to our viewing audience as we get ready for tonight's show? Dr. Nixon, if you would start, please.
All right, I am Glenn Nixon. I'm from the Fort Worth, Dallas area. I am an educator. I am a servant in the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Baptist Church. Also, a part of the Gospel Music Workshop. I actually serve as curriculum director for the Gospel Music Workshop. Shout out to all the GMWA delegates and members. Glad to be here with you all tonight.
Thank you for being with us, Dr. Nixon. Our co-worker in the ministry of A.M.N, Miss Karen, if you would, please.
Good evening, everyone. Glad to be with you this evening. Wow, what a fabulous topic we are going to be having a discourse on. I'm currently residing in South Africa. My background is in music. I'm a professional musician, choral, orchestral conductor, adjudicator, lecturer. I serve on the executive of A.M.N, and I also head the Multicultural Hymnal Project. So I'm hoping to hear lots of exciting feedback, interesting discourse on how we can move forward, exploring the hymns for the current era that we are in.
Great. Pastor Grosvenor.
Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Pastor Laurent Grosvenor, originally from Manchester, England, but currently live in Austin, Texas. I serve as the lead pastor of the Alpha Seventh-day Adventist Church here in Austin, and I am so honored to be here with so many brilliant minds. Looking forward to a great conversation today.
Thank you as well. Our friend in Houston, Miss Alicia.
Hi, yes, I am Alicia, and yes, I am. Right now, I reside in Houston, and I am a choral director. I'm also an educator, as well as a choral director too, in our church as well, and also worship leader in our church too.
Thank you. And the maestro himself, Brother Assel Jean-Pierre.
Hi. Good evening, everyone. I'm Assel Jean-Pierre, currently serving as the Minister of Music at the Palm Bay SDA Church alongside Pastor Dr. Wentley Phipps. Also at Antioch Missionary Baptist Church, a private music teacher, studio producer, you name it. I do music full-time. Music is my life. Glad to be here, part of this panel.
Thank you all for joining us on tonight. Listen, I want to jump right into this conversation. So let me start with the question. I kind of tagged a title on tonight's program called "To Him or Not to Him." So the question that I want to pose to our panel, the first question is this: should we engage or should we include hymns in our modern day service and today's church services? And if we should, give us your reason for backing as to why we should, and also if you feel that we should not, if there is a reason for that, could you also provide that backing as well?
Well, Dr. McPhee, I'm going to go ahead and call you Dr. McPhee because I know you're going that route too. You know, the hymn to the singer is as the Bible is, or the Word of God to the preacher. It is the foundation of all. So the hymns have been vetted, okay? And so, you know, I know we have the gospel songs, the contemporaries, the spirituals, the anthems, but the hymns, when you check the record on the hymns have been vetted. They have scripture to support them. There were panelists, a group just like we're doing tonight, put together to ensure that the hymns were doctrinally safe. And so when it comes down to the relevance of the hymn, we've got to keep the hymns in the church because the hymns align with the Word of God.
All right. Anyone else? Any other thoughts on that subject? Should we hymn or should we not hymn today?
I think that it's quite important for us to define what a hymn is, because we can have many songs that are doctrinally sound. We can have many songs that are related to scripture and that bear relevance. So how do we define a hymn? It has to follow a specific criteria. I don't know if the rest of the panel agrees with me or not on that. But generally, if we have a look at the hymns, it normally follows a specific pattern. It's strophic in nature. it normally has a verse and a chorus. It normally has a specific theme. It has to be doctrinally sound, as we've said, and it has to be scripturally sound. I don't know if anyone has anything else that they would like to add. If we just speak about the initial definition of a hymn before we move into the relevance of it.
Right. So are you referring more so to the structure of the hymn being
Yes.
having the
Yes,
verse
yes.
and the refrain or chorus?
The reason why I'm mentioning it is because sometimes it gets confused with the praise song, because praise songs are just as relevant. So, how do we define what a hymn is, and if we are we talking specifically about praise, about hymns, including praise songs, or just specifically hymns? Then we should define what that is and move from there.
Okay. So when we're looking at hymns, are there subcategories of hymns, or is a hymn just a broad term a broad stroke that we say this is a hymn, and then there are multiple types of structures or multiple types of hymns that fall up under one category? Is there subcategories that we need to define, or is it just that genre itself, or just that category itself?
Well, let me say, Thomas, and again, thank you so much for having me here on this panel. I do agree with Karen that there are often great confusion as relates to what a hymn is. Sometimes I'm on Facebook and some folks will say, "What's your favorite hymn?" And some things that people list there in my spirit that is not a hymn. That's a song. It's a great song, but it's not a hymn. And so I think we have to have a clear understanding of what hymns are, the metrical structure of hymns, whether it is a hymn that is of old, whether it's a new hymn. But the reality is there is a clear difference between hymns and praise songs. One of the challenges that I have seen in the contemporary church is that we have gone away from a lot of the theological substratum of a hymn. And we have a lot of confusion as to what hymns are. I grew up in a church where we sang on a regular basis hymns like "The Church is One Foundation" and "Rock of Ages" and "Shells from the Time of Storm." "Oh, I Want to See Him," and all these great hymns. But I think at the end of the day, no matter the reality that our methods must change, our message must stay the same. And I think hymns convey an authentic gospel message.
Well, if I may add, just in line with what Pastor Laurent just confirmed, and in the spirit of what Karen was saying, a hymn tells a theological story. That's a clear pattern difference between a hymn and praise and worship songs. Hymns, when you look at songs like "It Is Well with My Soul," very strong hymns are structured. They were structured in a way where from verse 1 to verse 2, you can get a theological message. Verse 2 to verse 3, until you get to verse 4. If you read the whole thing, it's very clear. It's very supportive to the approach of a theological message.
Alicia, were you saying something before?
Yeah, no, I was going to say, was jumping with Karen was saying the history. Part of the history of hymns too is that it comes from the Greeks as well. So the structure, the hymn poetry and everything is something, the structure was how the Greeks used it. And so when Paul talks about, the different songs, hymns and spiritual songs, he's always talking, let the Greeks bring their hymns as well, their religious songs, which was hymns, because it was formed like Assel was saying too. It's a poetry about with it telling a story that praises God and who says, and at the same time tells who God is in that story.
Right. I had the privilege to attend Glenn has a Metroplex Hymn Fest here in the DFW area. And Glenn, I'm trying to think of who actually made this statement during that Hymn Fest that you recently had. I'm not sure if it was yourself or one of the panelists that you had, but someone was stating about the actual verses of the hymn, and they're saying how the verses kind of build upon each other. And that last verse had a very significant part of the hymn. Is that something that you recall that was mentioned during that time, Glenn?
Possibly. It was either Dr. Kreider or Dr. Clark Joseph.
Yeah, I was thinking of Dr. Clark Joseph. That's what I was thinking. But of course, like everyone has said on the panel, the hymn has to be a doctrinally sound hymn. One of the things that I think that hymn does is it keeps us rooted in our beliefs, in our faith. So with that, also as I mentioned to the panelists before, I want to have a diverse panel with a diverse background. So we all know that the Adventist Church, we have multiple cultures that we all worship together in a lot of cases. So with that being said, how can we incorporate, or how important is it to make sure that we have hymns that's not only sound in doctrine, but also able to reach and to be relatable by the various cultures that may be represented in our churches?
Thomas, I'd like to jump in there. I think that's a great question. As someone who has, and I think Glenn, you'll appreciate this, as someone who has been in several different churches to preach and to share, but yet growing up in the Seventh-day Adventist Church on Saturdays, and on Sundays, my mother at that time was Anglican, and so I tell folk I was singing praise him on Sabbath, and then on Sunday we were singing the Gloria Patri. Yeah. And I was the organist at 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 years old at the St. Mark Church of England Church in Oldham, England, just outside of Manchester. So I've always had a great love for diverse hymns. Coming to America, I then started to hear hymnody in some other contexts that I'd never heard growing up Seventh-day Adventist. The hymnody is different. So I started to hear hymns like, "Oh, I Want to See Him," like Firm Foundation. I started to hear hymns like "Hold to God's Unchanging Hand." You didn't hear these in the Seventh-day Adventist Church growing up. Not only that, but the metronomic, the timing of the hymns were different. There was an internal metronome that we heard differently in the Baptist Church than we heard in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So hymnody was totally different. When I came to Alpha, I was so impressed by the work here. Minister of Music George Powell and our head elder Judge Eric Shepard just did an amazing job as it relates to hymns. I wanted to begin incorporating some other hymns. We talk about the top 10 hymns that we always sing. There were some other hymns I wanted to introduce liturgically to my congregation. Some of those hymns were not found in the Seventh-day Adventist hymnal. And I think it's important for us to understand that there is, if you go to a Church of God church, you'll hear different hymns in that tradition. There are some hymns in different faith traditions and different faith cultures that are also very powerful, and I think ought to be incorporated as we continue to grow together and to bring a level of diversity to our hymnody.
Very true. Very true. I have the pleasure to work with Glenn on Sunday as well at the Missionary Baptist Church. And one of the things that I really appreciate is the intentional inclusion of hymns in the worship service. There is a difference when you have a soloist or a group or a choir that's singing. Most of the time, when you have any of those types of individuals that's singing in the church service, the congregation is, even though they can get involved, but they're more so they're being sung to versus being able to relate to that song, unless they're familiar with it. But one thing that is common, I think, in across the gamut of churches, denominations, is if you sing the right hymn in church, everyone can relate to that hymn. So it's like it strikes a chord with individuals more so than maybe a popular song that's being sung by a praise team or a choir. But that hymn, even though it may be something that they may not be accustomed to hearing, maybe from growing up in their native land wherever they may be, but still being able to once they have that interaction with it, they can also grow an appreciation for the hymn. So, are there any other anyone have any other interjections as far as having the diversity of the hymns or how to reach various cultures within our churches?
What I have found is that um, if we look at our composers within our hymnal currently, we only have about 30 hymns that have been written by Adventists. So we are a multi-diverse at this moment, interdenominational, as far as I can see. I think we just probably, as the hymnal was redone, I think that was about 37 years ago. I think they selected hymns that they felt were more suitable in style. Because if we look at the hymn before that, which was also done 34 years prior, a lot of those beautiful hymns are no longer in our hymnal. So I think, according to the panel that sat for the very last hymnal, they selected according to a specific style. That's what I feel. But many of the composers of the hymns are not Adventists.
I had a conversation this week, and I believe, and someone actually gave me a test and asked me, did I know when was the last time the hymnal was updated? And I did. I just knew I was a younger person than what I am now. But they told me the last hymn was updated in 1985.
Yes, that's correct. It's about 37 years ago.
Yeah, 1985.
Thomas, you had your question, and I wanted to clearly kind of understand your question, because you were saying how do you diversify it? But do you mean like bring the hymns from the person, wherever country they come from, or how they sing it? And I ask that because most countries sing out. There's a lot of countries that are singing, many of the hymns that we do sing. But what I've noticed is how they sing it is different. In certain countries, they might put a little reggae beat to it, than just straight. Like I know, like East Africans, they have a little reggae beat to their hymns. Instead of singing it as straight as some other churches, those kind of things. So is that what you're meaning? Or do you mean, like, do we use the style of the country as they sing it in the church? Like if it's somebody from a Latin country, you put a little, do you arrange it, or do you mean bringing their hymns? Because their hymns too is pretty much like our hymns too, but it's in their language.
Well, that's interesting. Well, I would be a little careful as far as trying to if we don't have the capability is not there to do justice to do a certain rhythm or to make it more authentic to that particular culture, I would kind of stay away from that. But if there are actual musicians that are actually in our worship service from that cultural background that can authentically do so, I would think that would be a good thing to do if able to do so. So yeah, how can we incorporate that in our churches, or even if that is something that we should even do at all?
Maybe sometimes that could mean too, like even adding the language, like learn a little phrase in the language, or have somebody, maybe you can do one of the verses or that's some way to incorporate the diversity, of your church as well. that they can hear their language too, and they're singing too, and it makes them feel a bit part of a church, of a family. I mean, that's
Uh,
one. Yeah.
So
um,
Tom, I think the initial question was about the relevance of the hymns,
Yeah.
and we're in the year 2020, and many of the traditionalists, they want the hymn done the traditional way that it is written in the hymnal.
Right.
They want all the chords the same. And I think, again, back to what is doctrinally correct, what is scripturally correct. A lot of the young people, they don't know. As the story goes, when Thomas Dorsey did "Precious Lord"
Right.
in the church, they consider that very worldly.
Right.
That's
And
worldly
he
music.
had a jazz background. Yeah.
Yeah, he had a jazz background. Now, if we do "Precious Lord" in the church, I mean, that's old timey and outdated, And so as time has moved on, even in the church that I play at on Saturday, they like the traditional hymns. They like them the traditional way. And so I would play them the traditional way, a couple of bars, and then I'll put some contemporary notes in there, Assel, sometimes where they put a one, I put a six in there, or play a four. You hear me?
Yeah.
It's the same chord. Sometimes I just change to give it a more contemporary flavor, and so as we move along and as people are moving into this century with music, Jimmy Abington has a hymnal called "New Wine and Old Wine." And in that hymnal, changed some of the words, same tune, but changed some of the words to some of our familiar hymns. And so as we move along, with us keeping the tradition in mind, we've got to remember we have, and I think Pastor Grosvenor, your church is one of the more contemporary Adventist churches. I know a couple of people that attend your church, and so they get the whole gamut. I mean, they get the traditional and the contemporary.
if I may interject here, if we're going to have a real honest conversation, we're gonna have to tackle the elephant in the room. If we're gonna talk about hymns, I think one of the biggest challenges that especially our SDA churches are facing is that, unfortunately, 9 out of 10 musicians serving the church cannot read music. And
Correct.
if you can't read, you've got a massive problem with hymns presentation. And that is the reason why one of the reason why I started doing my presentation every 2 weeks. Sometimes I do it a month straight for Friday nights back to back. But and it turns out that many young musicians are watching my presentations about hymns of meditation and memorizing some of these hymns that I play that they've never heard of. So instead of churches investing in new musicians, in their young people, making sure they can read music, churches now are adjusting their presentation to the limits of the talents that they have hired. Now, these cats out there, you can't outplay them. They can play anybody out. Everybody can play out there. But what is our church going to do when we call out 341? I was on a panel who interviewed for like I was serving as an assistant, a consultant for a church in search of a musician. I couldn't join them because I was already hired. So they asked me to help them hire in the interview process. And one of the cats that can play I mean, I wish I could play like this dude. He can really play. He's very good. When we got to ask him, can you play the song Amazing Grace in the hymnal? He couldn't play it. He said, sing it. Once you start singing it, all he has to do is hear it one time and never again. You talk about a gifted dude. Now, that the lack of professionals, of not even professional, average musician who can read. Growing up, I mean, I came from the Haitian University of back in Haiti, back at home, back in my days. It felt like almost everybody could read music. I'm not saying about everybody could play the piano. I'm a professional pianist, but I remember growing around people who just could take any music book and read music. Nowadays, this generation at large does not read. And that is crippling the presentation of hymns in our churches. This is a major problem.
I agree. I agree with what was just shared. I had an amazing experience. I have a mentor, Dr. W. Franklin Richardson, pastors Grace Baptist Church in Mount Vernon, New York. And a few years ago, went to service. It was a youth day. It was a little younger. So I was youth days there. And the morning hymn, it was youth day. So I didn't think it would be a hymn. The morning hymn was "There Is Sunshine in My Soul Today." And we were in Doc's office, and I said, "Doc, y'all singing 'There Is Sunshine in My Soul Today'?" And that's a youth choir out there with hymn books, and they singing it like they've been singing it for years. He said, in his own way, he let me know that Grace Church can do anything. But you make a great point here, and I don't think it's just musicians. I think it's also our praise teams, some of our choirs that struggle. And it irks me. And thanks so much, Glenn, for the affirmation. It irks me, even when my own praise team can sing something very contemporary, fairly contemporary, or middle of the road, and it's amazing. And then we might get to a hymn, or we might get to an impromptu something, and the band got it, but it might take my praise team a couple of tries. They're an amazing praise team, but the discrepancy in so many churches across the country is very obvious, and it affects the congregation. It embeds in the congregation that this is not as important as that. Right. They don't practice as much for this as they have for that, and it's a challenge. And I don't see it getting any better across the whole gamut.
And I feel like it's not going to get better until the church, maybe I'm touching a spot, but until the church as a whole understands that for the music to actually excel and improve and be diverse, you have to put somebody in place to be minister music who is educated or who knows what exactly to do, how to teach them when to sing it this way, when to not, when do you play it this way, when do you sing that, play the hymns the way it's written, or when is it okay, to do your own, different, diverse, kind of thing. But what's happening in our churches too, you have people who are in charge of our place to be in charge of music who doesn't even have any knowledge about, hymns or anything like that. They just know what they see, and they're like, hey, this is what's going on right now, this is what everybody is singing. So they're just going with whatever is the trend. And that is an issue too that's happening within our churches. Or you have people that are just like, I prefer hymns and this is how I would like it. It's like this because that's all I know as well. And again, people who are not trained, they might play piano, and that's it, but it's a hobby. But when it comes to taking the music at a level that the congregation can really embrace, whether they're playing hymns or how to teach the hymns, how to teach new hymns, how to incorporate hymns from other cultures and things like that, that's where it falls short because, the lack of knowledge.
Right.
I would like to piggyback on that. The two speakers who have just mentioned this. I think that there's a fundamental problem, and that is, and I know this is now taking it to another level, but the reality is that we do not have a standard of music. within our church. As much as we have a hymnal, as much as we have a textbook, we actually don't have a syllabus. We don't have a core um, um, program for our musicians. For example, right at GC level, we do not have a directorate of music. The same way as we do have a lesson study, the structure of a lesson study. We have a syllabus for pathfinders, we have a syllabus for Sabbath school, for
Yes.
primary, juniors, but we do not have a syllabus for our musicians. And so as a result, we have no reference. We only have a hymnal that the congregation sings from. But then what do we do for our music directors? There needs to be a syllabus so that even if they do not know how to do something, they can refer to it and then guide the choristers, the praise team, etc., etc., and can also learn. And we could also conduct workshops, at conference level, at union level, division level. This is the fundamental problem that exists, and this is the reason why we do not have anything in place, which is very disconcerting.
Yes.
Well, Karen, let's do this. I want to discuss that a little bit more, but I want to take a little break and listen to a hymn of the church. I love to tell the story. So let's take a listen to this song, and then we'll come back and let's dig a little bit more into that concept, and also how that can roll over or spill over, or maybe how it has not spilled over into our local churches, and kind of do a little dive into that as well. Okay, so let's listen to I love to tell the story, and then we'll come back and continue our conversation. Wow. Yeah. So again, well, Maestro, we know that's not how it's written.
This
So
was
that,
brilliant.
that
That
was
was brilliant.
lovely arrangement,
It
man.
was awesome.
That's
Thank you. That's why it's called Hymns of Meditation. On Friday night, it's 1 hour of me lay back a little and just, I share with people what I would do at home when nobody's looking. When you're in the church, sometimes you're in performance mode as a minister of music, but people don't see what we are like at home. It's just us and it's just me and my wife. I get on the piano and that's how I play. That's what I love to play. So I decided to share it with the world and people are liking it.
yeah. Yeah, man, that was
That's
amazing,
great.
man. Some of the one of the things that I found troubling as a young musician coming up in church is it was almost, well, not almost, it was discouraged not to play what was written in the hymnal. I even had the experience even on when I was in college. I was living in Atlanta, and there's some churches I won't call their name because they have grown since then. Hallelujah. But there was at least two churches in Atlanta, Georgia, believe it or not, that if I would go and play for the youth choir or one of the gospel choir, as they would call it at that point in time, they would not allow me to play for the rest of the service. They were like, just come, you play for the special music, and then our musicians would play for the order of service because there's a certain way that they wanted it done. So, kind of getting back to the topic that Karen started with, our structure and our education or the importance of the music within the church. What are some of the things that we can do locally? We know that chances are that we'll be able to make a change on the GC level is probably out of the question. But what can we do in our local churches, in our local congregations, to do more education of the importance of the music ministry, as well as the importance of how to incorporate hymns into our service? Because we have a generation, I believe, that may or may not even know the majority of the hymns that we're even presenting in the church. So how can we educate? How can we incorporate that and get individuals involved and to become interested in hymns in our local churches?
Thomas, just a quick story based on what you just said. When I was coming up and I was playing in church, Seventh-day Adventist church, and we would sing 294, Power in the Blood. And I would play it, Power, right? And I used to have trouble. And they would say, it's not power, it's power. And I was getting in a lot of trouble putting in that extra note there.
Right, right.
You're right. Now, I think it's important to have a standard. It's vital. It's crucial to have a standard. My challenge with setting a standard, Karen, is that in preaching, we say that preaching is truth through personality. I feel that in some ways it's the same musically. I wonder if setting a specific standard based upon how the Seventh-day Adventist Church is may be somewhat restricting for some, based on who's around the table, based on history, based on different cultures. Music is very different in Dallas, Texas, and New York and Chicago than it is in Accra, than it is in Johannesburg. And so I wonder if setting a standard, we have to be careful in allowing for the personality of the musician to come. That's my first point. My second point is that oftentimes, and this is something that I'm sure many of you will have noticed, oftentimes in many of our churches, we're still struggling with the conversation of paying musicians, which affects quality, which affects commitment. There are so many churches, thankfully, we're not one of them, but there are so many churches that struggle with that. And there's a quality control issue there also. So I do think it's going to have a standard. I just wonder how enforceable it is, how many churches would stick to it, and whether it will be broad enough to include the personality of the musician.
You know what,
So
Pastor, I
that
can attest to that. Having been at Grace Temple, one of the things we did when Pastor Cox was there, we traveled quite a bit. We went from Ohio to Florida to California. And whereas we thought we were this great contemporary church, when we got to Emil Peeler's church in California, I mean, they were way outside the box. I mean, they had an incredible choir. We went to Ohio, visited there. They had their style of worship. And then we went to Orlando, went to a church in Orlando, man, had a phenomenal music department. I think Gail Murphy was there at that time. Then I had an opportunity to visit the church in Memphis. I think she was there at one time. But true to your statement, churches are different. The styles of worship are different. There should be a standard, but again, that personality of the church, of the congregation, you don't want to stagnate that.
Sorry. So what you're saying, standard is correct. I think is very important. But I wanted to share a little bit with my church. So my church, before the pandemic, we had like 52 different nationalities in our church. Post pandemic, I'm not sure exactly how many, but it's still very diverse. Once the new music director that came in, we sat down and we talked about is the church is diverse, and our motto is to build a multicultural, loving home, but the music wasn't. And so what we started doing is putting the music to be diverse, and be more multicultural. And so we still have the regular hymns. We put some gospel, and we put some contemporary praise as well. And then some of the hymns, we changed it a little bit. We did all of that. It's the majority of the church really enjoyed it. It really woke them up, and they're really singing and enjoying it. And then there's the other part of the church that is not, because we're not singing hymns the way it should be, in just regular straight. And so, but with that is now that people who were feeling left out, culturally, now feeling like, oh, okay, now we're included in this praise. Now we feel that we can praise as well, with that. But when you're talking about quality as well, that's something that we're growing still within our church, is quality. What I've learned is educating of what is quality, what can sound better, and helping them kind of grow in that area, and not lowering your standards. Is what I'm trying to say. Not lowering your standards, but helping them, in a loving way, and being patient in raising that standards. And sometimes that means too, like, educating your own pastor as well. That's another area too. That many of our pastors come out not really understanding truly music and worship, and that's a whole nother.
So you're opening up another can. So here's which is good, which is why I asked Pastor G to be here with us, because I also wanted to get a little background or a little insight from a administrative pastoral point of view of maybe if a pastor is not musically inclined or may not have that tendency or to lean towards music, how can we still bridge that gap? How can we still present knowing the outlay of our congregation, knowing who is there, of course, is very, very important. But how do we present that to a pastor? And what's from the pastor's point of view? How how does that dynamic work? How you work that out?
Yeah, great question, and it's a very important. Um, there are some pastors, and I'll just stick in in our own Seventh Adventist denomination who I have known to be known to have great relationships with their music department, their music ministry, and sometimes musicians themselves. Glenn, you mentioned Emil Dean Peeler. I think of Jesse Wilson. I think of Gregory Nelson. I think of James Richard Doggett. So many individuals, quite a few individuals, Whitley Phipps, obviously, who are pastors but are musically inclined. Not everyone is of that ilk, unfortunately. And there has to be a level of humility in knowing what your strengths are, and also dialogue. You've got to be able to dialogue with your minister of music. There has to be good relationship between the two. There are some things that Josh Powell will tell me that, okay, I don't see it, but go ahead. And then there are some things that he may want to do that I may say, yeah, no, let's do this instead. But we go back and forth and we dialogue, and it works to the glory of God. I think that as pastors, it is key, firstly, to bring in people who can help carry your vision, number one, but also individuals, musicians, who can help you be better, and to be able to trust them to bring the level of creativity, whilst also saying, here's what I would like to see. I think it can work. Some of the challenges that I've seen across the country is perhaps when individuals clash, when personalities clash. But I think if there's good dialogue and understanding the strengths and weaknesses, there can be great relationship and great glory to God.
Right. Yeah, I think that's very important, having that conversation, being able to approach each other and working together to making the worship experience one that is fulfilling for all those involved. That's very important.
If I may add, this is a very important point that maybe, unless you're in my shoe, you might not even realize how crucial this is. Well, let me speak on behalf of musicians with a professional background, not just a pianist. Those of us with professional background who can lead an orchestra, who can put together a Christmas cantata concert at a different level multiple times. I have met and recognized pastors that sees ministers of music at that level not as a partner, but more as a you know what? Let me not say the word. You help me out. You figure it out. Right. I will say that I'm probably one of the most blessed musicians on the planet, not because of who Whitley Phipps is, but because of the person that the world may not know, who he is, that I get to know. It's more than him being a great singer. Without his support musically, there's no way I could have been at the Palm Bay SDA Church for 16 years and zero issues. I mean, this is a church, a very multi-faith congregation. There's all kinds of nations there, different countries. So the music in that church has to be very versatile. And I will tell you, this has been the best 16 years of my music ministry. And it's because also, when we talk about hymns, this is Pastor Phipps. That's what he loves. So he sends the right signal to the congregation, which makes my ministry a lot easier. Today, we rehearsed with the praise team, got ready to do 2 contemporary songs. And for some reasons, I felt the flow of the service in the church. And before we went into praise and worship, I decided to just throw a hymn in that place. And the place just lit up. I heard an old story, Victory in Jesus. It's not in the SDA hymnal, We did that song, and I think after that song, Pastor Phipps could have just gotten and preached, and I should have just canceled everything after that. That goes to show the power of hymns in our service, but at the same time, it's important to have the support of whomever the lead pastor is, because guys like us who serve as ministers of music, without the support and the honest commitment of our lead pastor, we're in trouble.
Right. You're absolutely correct. There is another area I want us to get to. Gail Jones-Murphy has a question that she has posed to the panel, but I want to save that question for right now, because what I want to do is actually play one of her songs that has been published as a hymn. And of course, I'm sure most of us are familiar with the song titled Sabbath Rest. So I would like to play that particular song, and then I want to come back and follow that song with a question that she would like to pose to our panel on this evening. Okay, so let's listen to Gail Jones-Murphy and Sabbath Rest.
We leave our cares behind.
So
Amen.
here's the question that our friend Gail Jones Murphy has actually posed, and it is a great question because it takes us into the next segment that we want to discuss. Her question is, if I can get my technology to work. All right. So she would like to hear from the panelists what are some specific standards for hymns in the modern church? What are some of the hymns that we can use in the modern church that are by name that we can use today?
Well, again, Thomas, I think that, what I initially said, they must agree with what the scriptures are saying. Um, I think when we're singing the hymns, the hymns should point us to God. And so even with us introducing the hymns, we know the standards. I mean, we know basically the standards that are in the hymnal. But as new hymnals are coming out, I know y'all are speaking from the perspective of the Adventist church, but even in some of the Adventist churches, they use some of the other hymns. Um, the hymns need to point to God, and I think that they have to be relevant to when we're talking about the structure of the service. You need to know what hymn to do in certain places. Like what hymn do you do at communion? What hymn do you do for baptismal? What hymns do you do at Christmas? What hymns do you do at Thanksgiving? And so I don't know if that answers the question. Somebody else can add to it.
And I may be interpreting her wrong, but I think maybe she's asking for also maybe some hymn titles, maybe that we can use as standards in the modern church, possibly. And if she's still on, she can always tell me if I'm right or wrong with her interpretation of that. But like she said, hymns do point to God, and we've stated that's been stated. It's all agreed upon that that's something that points to God. But I guess to get us uh, out of the position where we're doing the same songs over and over again, are there other songs that can be used as standard? What are standard songs now that we use, or are there others that we can include into that list as well?
Could I say that a lot is dependent upon the style of worship, upon the culture, because some people may prefer Rock of Ages. Another group may prefer some of them. There's Power in the Blood, and some may prefer a more conservative Take Time to Be Holy. You know, it depends on the order of the service, and I think that the whole setup would depend a lot on the order of the service and the culture that is worshiping, because every culture is going to interpret the hymns differently, interpret the service differently. That is the reason why I spoke about structure. I see pastors not with us anymore, but I really want to say that when I spoke about structure, I was referring to the fact that we could have the structure only as a guideline. And then everybody, your personality and your style would still determine how that worship, praise and worship comes together. But there needs to be some form of structure just to guide our musicians. Because we can have, in some churches, highly educated musicians, and in some churches, musicians who are not When I say educated, I mean musically educated. But they're doing their very best for the master because they are serving with a sincere heart.
Right. Yes.
Um,
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
so,
Go
so
ahead.
go ahead, Alicia.
Sorry. I was going to say, I think the delivery of it too is what really is very important as well. When I say delivery, is how you sing it, how your team sings it, because if you're going to go up there and sing Rock of Ages, then, definitely they're going to be disinterested. They're not going to really enjoy it. And I think the standard is you have to make sure, if you're using a praise team, make sure your team understands what they're singing and make sure they also understand that what they're doing is this is also a sermon that they're giving, and they
Mm,
must feel it and understand what they're singing. And when they sing with that passion, automatically it goes to, that passion gets to the congregation. And then the
Right.
congregation is not going to feel like, oh, we're singing, they're going to feel a more connection to it. And I think the standard is not only is, I think the standard would be is no matter which hymn you are singing, make sure that whoever is singing understands what they're singing, and they are showing that they understand what they're singing as well as even putting dynamics into it. I think a lot of them too, what happens a lot is when people sing hymns, another thing is they don't put any dynamics, at all. It's just like straight, and that's something else too. And it's like we have to also, you know, if the words, depending what the words say, if the dynamic is soft, let it be soft. But at some point, you do have to go maybe crescendo, get louder, and go forte. But you need to sing it with understanding, and of course, that is biblical. The Bible says to sing it with understanding, making a melody with your heart. If that's connected, then it'll connect with the congregation.
Right. That's something that Gil just commented as well to echo that same sentiment that the scripture says that we should sing with understanding. So, with that,
And
let me pose a
Thomas,
question. Mhm.
Thomas, could I please just add there
Sure.
that singing with understanding also means that we as music leaders need to be prepared. Preparation is also critical because
Absolutely.
very often we go up there and our praise team have not rehearsed. They go up there and they're not convincing in what they are relaying to the rest of the church.
Right.
So that is also a very critical aspect to our delivery of our hymns, because for understanding we need to be led in a specific manner as well. And to Gail, that was a beautiful, beautiful hymn that you presented to us, that you composed. Thank you so much for that.
Thomas,
Just
before
one phrase, one quick phrase that I'm going to add. I remember Pastor Phipps preaching in church. He said, if somebody gets on the pulpit and preaches without their notes, without a prepared sermon, you're either a genius or a fool. I didn't say that, but Pastor Phipps says that. Now,
Wow.
as a musician, well, Karen just said it. You cannot look at yourself as a consistent, responsible musician and show up without preparation. The hymns are portable sermons. Let me say it again. Hymns are portable sermons. I hope my accent is not messing up my thoughts. Just like a pastor would take 3-4 days to prepare a sermon, it is my duty to also take the same amount of time and sometimes a whole week. The service that I did today took me the whole week. It took me the whole week to prepare for this. It takes time. We got to start looking at hymns as portable sermons, and it has to start with us, the leaders first, before we can transmit that energy to our team.
Thomas, I wanted to say this. I think in the church, we're known for preparation, and we ought to prepare. I spend quite a bit of time working on music, preparing, because I don't ever want to look like I don't know what I'm doing.
Right.
But one of the things too with this whole work, ministry and singing and directing and playing, I mean, you've got to have what we say in the first day church. You've got to have the fire and the Holy Ghost, because it is God. At the end of the day, I mean, you can go to school and learn music. Anybody to play, they can play. I mean, they can direct, they can sing. I mean, I went to school where people were just gifted or skilled, but when you have someone with the fire and the Holy Ghost, today the hymn we did was "Lead Me to Calvary," and man, I could have just jumped up. That's one of my favorite old hymns. I think the pastor picked it, but whoever picked it, it was on time today. I mean, we could have sung that forever. But again, it wasn't so much as us just doing a hymn, but it was the fervent, singing and playing and worship that lifted the hymn. The old people, we say sing a hymn, but the old people would lift the hymn. They would lift it up to the Lord.
So here's a question that I would like to pose to the panel. So we know that it's important to be able to read the hymn and to play the hymn in its original as it's written. It's important to give deference to the composer, and I think you have to. That's just as a musician, that's a level of respect that you give to the writer of the hymn. But is it okay to make changes to a hymn as written? And if so, when is it okay to make those changes and to present those changes?
Can I first? There's one thing that we need to be careful when we say too that hymns need to be sung as written, because depending, like some countries, it's not written, and some of the people that come from a congregation, it's not written. If you see some of the hymn books in some countries, they're all in solfege, like do, re, ti. There is not notes. So really, it's like their interpretation is what for them is how their harmony, how they hear it is their interpretation. So we also have to be careful when we say, it has to be as written. It's like as written as who? The American way or who? That's also being, not thinking about the others around you. That's one part. But our hymns, the way hymns were written too, I think is a guide. If you look at it, you have the soprano, the alto, and the tenor and the bass, but you really don't have the accompaniment way. Okay, it's just vocals that is written. So really, that means that it is up to the person how they want to deliver it. Now, there's the rhythm. There's the guide too. There's some things, but I think there is also open for arrangement. And I think that's why hymns are so easy to arrange, because I mean, even when it's arranged, it's beautiful, as well as, some other spiritual songs, or contemporary songs are not as easy to arrange. Well, usually if you arrange a contemporary song, it's like, but with hymns, I think I think they're written as a guide, but it's open for how you want to arrange it. And I think a person is able to arrange it, should be open to arrange it. But the question is it fitting to what the lyrics are saying too when you arrange it?
And also, is it fitting? Is it fitting for the type of service? Because with our hymns, we do have our time signatures, which normally gives us a bit of the slant of the rhythm. If it's 6/8 or if it's 3/4, it gives us the feel of the music. Because even if we have it written in a solfege, you'll find that they will still follow the rhythm. They may speed up the hymn or they may slow it down, but they will normally stick to the structure of so many beats per minute. Uh, you know, unless of course it's been rearranged.
You talking
On
about
that on that subject, I think that's where those of us with professional training need to exercise some level of humility. Let me explain.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. If I fly tomorrow to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, at the Haitian University, and they ask me to play "To God Be the Glory," I would pretty much at 99% play it like it's written, exact timing. That's the environment that I grew up in. But when I moved to America and I started playing in smaller country churches where it was mostly soulful Black Americans, that changed my entire music lifestyle. That's where I pretty much got my soulful style of playing because in those, I'm not talking about big cities, I'm talking about the country churches where people get up and clap and they sing pretty much any way they can, any way they want to. But that soulful style of playing, you get it in churches where they don't have a big budget ministry. But I wish I could encourage every starting musician to join a small church in the country and get a vibe, get that vibe, that feeling. You'll grow, you'll learn a lot from it. So if you have a chance to practice with your praise team and prepare the hymn that you gotta do, of course, we most likely will stay on course. But it depends on the congregation and where. If I'm in a university environment, I'm gonna play a certain way. But if I'm at home on Friday night, I'm not going to play 1, 2, 3, 4 like it is. This is meditation time. I'm gonna loosen up and be me. And by the way, I've gotten calls from someone who called me back and say, "Oh, Assel, the song that you play was written in 6/4, but you played in the 4/4."
Wow.
Hey,
Wow.
I said to him, if you want some music lessons, join me Monday afternoon. That's when I teach. I'll show you how to play the Litz Rhapsody. I'm still teaching that kind of stuff. But on Friday night, it's my meditation time.
Right.
That's one. And remember that. I had to also remind him that the same songs, the same hymn maybe in English has a certain rhythm. In French, with a different translation, the rhythm is different. So if I'm sitting there just playing, you may not know even which version I'm playing. And that's why I have my wife sometimes put the lyrics in French and the lyrics in English. So that, back to my point, a little humility will go a long way.
Right. Glenn, you're about to say something, Glenn?
Oh no! What I was saying earlier, we were talking about adjusting the songs. Sometimes we're talking about rhythm and tempo. When the songs are written with a certain rhythm. The notes dictate the rhythm, but the tempo, we can slow it up or speed it up, or keep it wherever we need it to be. And I think that comes with knowing how to, knowing the pulse of the service, I think sometimes someone alluded to this earlier, that they changed a song to agree with what was going on in the service. Because of course we plan. But I heard an older musician tell me many years ago, you prepare, but be prepared. And what he was saying is be prepared to make adjustments if you need to.
Absolutely. This is coming with, of course, with Nerve I wanted to put back up, where he was kind of addressing this topic of saying it's absolutely okay to change the harmonic progressions of a hymn. Hymns are written using tonal harmonies for the chorus style. If a musician is accompanying a choir or group that is singing the harmonies as written, then it's the musician's responsibility to refrain from making changes. However, if the hymn is being sung in unison, then the musician should have the freedom to make changes. Creativity is key to making the hymn come alive. And I think that goes back to being kind of what you're saying, as far as getting the understanding of music in your church that you're in. There are times when it is opportunity to make some changes. There's times when it's good to do some embellishment, or maybe add some sevenths, or changing some of the chord positions, or some reharmonization. But you have to know when and where to do those things. You can't do that if you have 3 or 4 part harmony that's being sung, and you're just going to reharm the whole chord structure to make your own parts there. So it's good to know when and where to put those different licks in, when to make those chord changes. Is a part of your preparation, and also a part of the training as well, when it comes to being a musician, and especially when we're doing for congregational singing. This is I want to do one more song from Assel from his program. This is kind of an example of rhythmic changes of a song, and making it a little bit more a lighter version of the hymn. So this is Standing on the Promises. I'm sure we've all heard that, we've all sang that at some point or heard the song, but this is Standing on the Promises from Assel Jean-Pierre. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So
I
Revise
don't
that.
know what to say. Thank you to my guys. Thank you, Nova. Thank you, Gail. I mean, now watching this thing back, it's different.
right, being on the other side, right?
I got to be careful what I do on Friday nights now.
You have all the heavyweights here, man. Nerva, yeah, Gail, you have some heavyweights here, man. You Joel was saying how you inspire him. Now he want to do an album of him. So so listen, it goes to show that when you have I think one of the comments mentioned the skill set of a musician, that you can go in and out of key signatures. I mean, time signatures. You can go in and out and do it in a way that is still presented with quality. And I think that's one of the things that we mentioned tonight, is that you have to have the preparation. You have to have a skill set that will allow you to do that. Everyone cannot sit at the piano, especially not doing a worship service, and say, "Oh, I'm going to be creative now," and just go off the script, so to speak. Especially when it comes to a hymn, because most of the times when we are presenting hymns, is a congregational a piece of music. So there it does have some way that you can have leeways where you can be creative. But if you're conducting, if you're leading out in the hymn for congregational purposes, you still have to know what you have to know when to do certain things and how to do so. So I guess when we think of hymns, I just want to hear everyone's opinion on how would you compare or differ a hymn to the other forms of worship music, praise team music, a chorus song, or a soloist. What would differ that? What makes the hymn stand out on its own when you're in a worship service?
Before we answer that, could I just mention something that you spoke about now, and that is, as much as we need to have preparation when presenting the hymns, we need to have discernment, and we also need to seek the Lord's. Um, we need insight. We need to be touched by His Spirit. I think that is very critical, because this is not just a technical exercise. We are there to bless others, and through the mercy of God. So that is critical as part of the structure, the part of the system, as we lead out and as we select our hymns and as we present. That is critical and needs to be in place.
Okay, so in comparison with other, that's very true, Karen. We should know that before we present anything, before we go before the people of God with our music, we do need to consult God first and foremost as to what direction we should go and where we should take for that particular service. Um, when we're looking at, I guess, the various styles or types of music within the church, or whether it be for praise and worship, a hymn, a choir, or soloist. We do know, and this is just my belief, that hymns or music in a church service, the responsibility is to set the atmosphere of worship. And that also includes, of course, setting the atmosphere for the preached word, if we're in a church service. So we know each element has its part. I guess I'm interested to know your opinions on how does the hymn setting of the atmosphere differ than other aspects of music in a worship service.
A hymn is more formal in structure than a praise song. A praise song can be more liberating. One can clap according to it, depending on the culture, depending on the diversity in the church. Whereas With the hymn, it is much more formal in nature and in presentation.
So is the atmosphere of a hymn, is it different than the atmosphere that is set from a choir selection? Does it provide a different feeling? Does it provide a different space in the worship service, or do they all pretty much do the same thing?
I generally look at hymns a little very different from pretty much everything else. If you take out the organ, the piano during a hymn presentation, if you take out the music, figure out what you have in a hymn, compare that to anything else musically, praise and worship, contemporary music. You're doing contemporary music, you take out the music, you have pretty much nothing left. I'm sorry to be so blunt. The hymns, you take out the instrument, you have a sermon of 4, 5, 6 verses without instrument, without music. The power that is found in those hymns is the reason why these things are lasting 500, 600 years. Compared to those beautiful melodies that are on the market today, but I guarantee you 6 months from now, they'll be replaced. The power, the theological points and messages that we're getting from these hymns are simply unmatched. What is important is for us at this stage of our lives to work on ways to transmit that same energy and that same level of interest to the next generation, because that's where we have a big problem. And it's a serious problem that our church is not addressing with the new wave of contemporary music, praise and worship. Teams are taking a backseat, and without presentations and like this, like what Thomas is doing with the Adventist Musician Network, we're going to need more of those because our leadership seems to be very silent about this. That's my take for now.
Thomas, I think one of the things with the hymns, I think the music gives it its authenticity from the standpoint of the way the music is written, the way the music aligns with the text. I think Assel mentioned that the hymns, how they've lasted through the centuries. I think strong text, strong notation, and then the universal sound, like when we say Amazing Grace. Amazing Grace is known all over the world.
Right.
I think that, and it goes back to what we've kind of been talking about through this session tonight. Great hymns. Those of us that have been around during this century, we know them. We grew up on them. I mean, we can go and open up a hymnal and sit down and play them, because we've been taught to read music. But again, if we don't teach the next generation how to read the music, we'll have great hymns lost. But I think the main point that I wanted to make was the text and the tune. I think that is what makes for a great hymn.
Right. Yeah, it sticks. That melody it sticks, and then of course the words pulls you in and holds you there. Alicia, you had something you wanted to add to the topic?
Yes, I think hymns also, I mean, let's not forget that I think all of them are important in all these different, styles of worship music is important in our churches. because they all serve different purpose.
Mhm.
The hymn, what is beautiful about the hymn is the strength that it has, the power that it has, and meaning like it talks like about the power of God. It really talks about how much we need Him. The poetry, the way it's laid out, like it was stated before, is building. It builds and builds and builds. It's not like okay, repeat. It's building. It's a story going, and there's a build to it that points all about how powerful God is. One of the things about praise music, what I've noticed is that a lot of them tends to go more into self, self, the reasons of self needing, self reason, self, instead of more like of what God is, what He has done, the power, the beauty of Him, and everything that. And in this world that we are so much built, this world is focused so much on selfish needs. This is where the hymns comes in to remind us that, to that only God is the only one that can give us the power, not only to change or whatever weaknesses you have or anything. It's God that only is that's the only one that can give you that has the power. And I think that's something that is different from a lot of the praise songs today. A lot of the praise songs too is like um, you know, just like you're saying too, because of um of the power that it has, it can stand on its own. The hymns, you can do all these beautiful harmony with it, and you can also just go unison, and it's still beautiful. And you can add extra harmonies, and it's still beautiful. But as of praise songs, there's just so much that you can do. Does not mean that it's less, but I think they all have its place in worship.
Right. Listen, this has
Um,
been you
I
some.
wanted to mention that the issue of the relevance of the hymn, um, carrying it into the next generation, how do we keep it relevant? I think we definitely know that the themes of our hymns are very powerful indeed. But one thing too that we need to be aware of, or just consciously carry through, is to make it relevant to the culture that we are working with. So, so that everyone within that area and that culture can relate to the way it's being sung. And that's the reason why the multicultural hymnal project is so important, because the idea is even if we do not have original submissions, we can still take those hymns, translate it into the languages um, that is relevant for that specific culture. We can sing it with the rhythms, with the style that is relevant, so that it is more transmittable, so that it is more relevant for each culture.
Yes, that's very true, Karen. So, again, Karen is over the multicultural hymnal project that we're uh, doing with the Adventist Musician Network International. It's a huge undertaking. I tell her that all of the time. That's a huge project, but also I think it's necessary, as she just alluded to. Being able to take either original pieces of work as a hymn or those that may already be established hymns, but making it relevant or making it more conducive to the particular region or the culture, I think is to bring a whole new uh, life to the hymns, to that piece of music for that particular area. So we are endeavoring to do so to make sure that the multicultural hymn reflects the different cultures that are represented by us worldwide. Um, guys, this was a great conversation. There was a couple comments that was looking for a part two already. So if you all see my phone number come across your phone, no, don't send me the voicemail. Really, I have to do a part two on this because this is a subject that has so many different avenues, so many different areas that we can discuss on this. I'm sure we can do this, just on and on. But I want to personally thank each of you for your time, being with sharing with us tonight, sharing your wisdom, sharing your expertise and your skill set that each of you bring to the table. At this time, I will open up if there's any final words or any final thoughts that any of you would like to share with our viewing audience.
Thomas, I just want to end with this. I mean, let's just do the hymns. I mean, we can talk about it. We can give scholarly input and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, just do them. Open up that hymnal. Make sure that there is a hymn or hymns throughout the service. And if you don't have anything else to play a hymn.
Yeah.
Do an opening hymn. If you have the opportunity to do a doxology, or what we would call sometimes the closing song. The more the people hear the hymns, they will enjoy them and they will become indoctrinated by the hymns.
Yes. I have a friend here by the name of Melody Virgil. She's probably going to talk about me for calling her name out, but I'll deal with that later. She's in Houston, actually, Alicia. She has this phrase that she says that she picked up some years ago as it relates to music in church. She says, "Whenever in doubt, hymn it out." So you'll grab some people, just put those hymns in there. So I think it's always a good. It's good to have that in your repertoire. That should be part of every musician, minister of music, choir, praise team, soloist. Everyone who's involved in the music ministry should have a good grasp on hymns. As you say, that's our foundation. Musically, that's your go-to. So it has so many different ways that it can bring a service into a place of just pure worship. I recall being in the service and the choir they was doing all of the contemporary stuff. The praise team was slamming and this I want a more seasoned woman. She stood up and sang Amazing Grace, and the church fell out just from a hymn. So it's just having that doctrine as everyone has stated before, being doctrinally sound and also being relatable is unparalleled. Is unparalleled. Any other thoughts?
Well, hymns are here to stay. I'm not so concerned, so worried about the younger generation. It's just a matter of time. As long as they keep living, one day they will themselves discover the power of those hymns on their own. Meanwhile, what the challenge is for us in a leading position to present these hymns in a way that is pleasant to God, attractive to our congregation, and keep on playing those hymns.
Yes. So I want to read a comment as our closing thought to close out tonight from another maestro extraordinaire himself, Nerva. He says, "I love what you all are saying here. So very true. As Alicia said, hymns are poetry. Not everyone can relate to great poetry. Praise songs are more relatable to much of our society. This is why they are so popular. They all play an important part of worship and can coexist if a knowledgeable and able music director is creative enough to make it all work. Hymns will never get played out. As my brother Sel said, its substance is unmatched." So again, everyone, as we all can say, as we start off tonight's program with the question to him or not to him, I think we all can agree that we're definitely going to hymn it out. When in doubt, hymn it out. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. This was a great time. A lot of information was shared. stand by because apparently they're asking for a part two. So I don't know what part two would look like yet, but we'll see what happens in God's knowledge of what to do next. Again, thank you all for your time tonight. Glenn Nixon, Assel, Jean-Pierre, Karen Schofield-Nel, and Alicia Jones. Now, is it Lumbuz?
Lumbuz.
Lumbuz. All right, you just say
Lumbuz.
Kenya, correct?
And thank you, Thomas, for your direction, for the succinct, amazing questions that you posed. Made everyone think a great deal. And in conclusion, let me just add that we should remember that every hymn is a sermon, and that we as music directors determine how that sermon is effected. So let us keep that in mind, whether for reverence, whether for reflection, whether for praise. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, thank you all for your time tonight. Until next time, everyone, you be blessed and stay safe. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Later.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Good night.
Good night.